I am encouraging my children to take a very different approach to dating than the way I saw it. So I'm very, like, I didn't read a book. I was totally winging it for my whole life.
Yeah.
I never really had an issue with dating. Like, if I wanted a date, I got a date. I mean, I'm not saying it like an inconceived
Like,
way.
I was a bad chick.
No.
So,
Hello and welcome to Adventures in One Love. I'm Lydia and we are excited to bring you It Starts With One. This is a singleness series. Talks about singleness, marriage, and what that looks like. And today we are talking about dating in the church, dating out of the church, the different philosophies. I got my peeps. So I'm going to start with the introductions. I am 42. I am remarried. We're a blended family. And my experiences with dating are outside of the church. Heathen dating. I'm just kidding.
Hashtag heathen
she's not
dating.
kidding.
Kidding, not kidding. Yeah. I want to turn it over to my co-host.
Okay, so I'm Alex. If you have
Alex.
Hi. If you have watched the series from the beginning, you'll know that I'm 30 years old.
Come on, say it with pride, girl.
I'm 30 and single, like super single. And then my very limited experience with dating has only been in the church.
Okay. And we are joined by...
My name is Katherine. I am 30 years old, and I have experience in both, in and outside of church.
And you are currently
Married. Newly married.
Yes, newlyweds.
Congratulations. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
Amen. We've got two newlyweds at the table.
Oh,
I consider myself a newlywed. I've been married for 14 years. So I'm still a newlywed.
that's right.
Very
Come
nice.
on. Or the gentleman at the table.
The one guy here. I am Kareem. I am 30-some years old. I'm 34. Been married
young
for, I think it's 2 years now, right? Is it 2 years?
Why are you
it's 2
asking
years.
Alex?
Because I was
she
there, apparently.
So
yeah, about 2
but
years.
yeah, it's been about 2 years.
Awesome.
So fairly new baby at home. And my experience it's weird. I grew up in the church, but a different kind of church. And I secular dated and Christian dated. It was like a back and forth act. So a lot of both, actually. So
That's super fair.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We are so glad to have this conversation. I think that we need to kind of shed some light on the different experiences. So we're going to get right into this conversation. Alex,
points
take
at
it
me.
away. I'm like, come on, Alex, tell us what we're doing.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, the question that's going to just, set us off is, sorry, I hit the table. What are the different philosophies of dating that you have been exposed to and kind of, I wouldn't say adhered to, but what like philosophies of dating such as, oh, there's only one for you, or, that one guy who wrote that one book, Kiss Dating Goodbye, you're reacting so
Breathing
hard
deeply.
right now. I know you have so much to say about this. But yeah, I just want to know like the philosophies of dating that you have heard of out there, both inside and out of the church. So whoever wants to start with that one.
Ladies first. You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
You sure? Okay.
Show me the way.
Well, I'll jump in. I've heard of just about every philosophy out there. I've read the book I Kiss Dating Goodbye. I've read the courtship books. That's from the Christian side. Find the one. I've read plenty about that, Christian and non-Christian alike. On the secular side, sleep with them until you find the right one, or shack up and don't quite get married. See if you like it.
That's a book?
It's Flavor of the Day is a book.
Oh, wow. Never heard that
I've
one.
seen all of those kind of, modus of operandus books that, speak on the dating subject. So wherever y'all want to dive in, we can kind of pick them apart one by one. What have you heard about?
What have you been exposed to, Katherine?
So same thing. I mean, I've heard there's one person in particular for you in and outside of church. I particularly don't believe in that. I think there's multiple people for you out there. I think you have to kind of choose the right person once you kind of know that it's the right person. But I do know that there's a lot of people out there just kind of searching for that person, that particular person that fits everything. And that's a little difficult to find. So that's just...
Very interesting. So even though I did not date in the church, and I feel like I've been habitually married. That's from my testimony video, y'all. I'm raising children that are dating, and they're dating in the church, and so now they're of dating age. And we were like, you can start dating when you're 16. Like every 16-year-old is not ready for dating, so maybe that's not the best advice for everyone. But it has been very interesting because I am encouraging my children to take a very different approach to dating than the way I saw it. So I'm very, I didn't read a book. I was totally winging it for my whole life.
Yeah.
I never really had an issue with dating. Like, if I wanted a date, I got a date. I mean, I'm not saying it like an inconsiderate way.
I was a bad chick.
No,
so when I wanted a date, I got one.
I mean, I'm not saying the quality.
No, I'm not saying I wasn't. She hasn't denied it yet, right?
I mean, come on.
Can we start there though?
Yes,
I think
please.
that's like such a cool place to start. So my background is in business and finance, but in another life, once upon a time, I was also a teacher. So I got to interact with a lot of middle schoolers, high schoolers, and things like that. So dating, I had something called Mr. Bell Talks, right?
Nice.
Where during homeroom, the kids could ask me anything they wanted to ask me about dating or about relationships, and I would be honest with them. Obviously within certain parameters and things like that. So they knew what kind of questions they could ask. They knew how to ask questions. But to the point of that, like, dating is interesting. And so you brought up your kids, right? And the age in which you wanted to start introducing to dating. I think you said 16, right? So
formally dating.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's like a great place for me, at least, to start, because like I'm super passionate about that. I just had a daughter. She's going to be 3 months on the 25th. And she has instantly become the light of my world. And your patterns of thought start to change about that, right? So I was dating from a very young age, if you could call it dating. I was experimenting with sexuality from a very young age. Like, oh, do I like this? Can I kiss her? Can I touch her? It was a weird place to be, especially in like middle school. That's where it began. So from those experiences and from my life now, I got saved as an adult, right? So that's when I became a Christian. So I got to kind of see the whole secular side, and then was introduced to the Christian side. Dating from a young age, I've kind of come to this conclusion, and you guys can disagree with me on this, but I don't want my daughter dating until she can get married. Outside of first of all, what is dating, right? It's you're trying to figure out, all right, is this person for me, like, long term? So I kind of I take issue with children dating, and no disrespect to any parents out there who let their kids date. Everybody has a different style, right? But why let them date if they're not ready to be married? Right. I feel like that's only going to introduce them to heartache, pain, frustration. It's going to introduce them early to sexuality, right? They're not ready to open that door yet. So why are we putting them at the door to knock? So I'm kind of interested in what you got. I'm a hardliner on just about everything. So I'm curious about what you guys' thoughts are with that. And I just know for me personally, the reason I've come to that conclusion is my parents were very laissez-faire, hands off, right? Let them make their mistakes, let them go out and, do their thing. And I feel like they were trying to do their best, but that caused a lot of heart damage because me out there experimenting, I probably I know I ruined from conversation that I've been able to have with some of these ladies that I have, kept in contact with and talked to. I damaged some hearts, and it's because I was not ready. And I was in an environment and I was expected to act like a gentleman or an adult, and I didn't know how to do that. So what do you guys think?
I love that.
So I kind of had the opposite, like, upbringing, I guess it was exactly what you say. You're not dating until you're ready for marriage, and that was told to me and we talked about that a little bit in the old previous episodes, but it was like, okay, basically in church, and my parents were always like, dating is for marriage. And so me growing up, I was like, I'm little, I can't date. That was my philosophy. And I brought this up too. I told this story before, but I'm the first kid who asked me out, we were 10. And I literally, my thought at 10 years old, weird little child that I was like, your mom's going to take us out?
We're going to go to McDonald's?
We're going to go to Chuck E. Cheese? Like, what are we going to do? So it was a brutal rejection. I probably have karma from that now. But like, but then... I heard something recently. I was reading, again, Party of One. I still don't remember the author's name, but it was really good. And she said something about how, like, us little Christian church girls, we grew up with that philosophy, right? And at the end of the day, we do like that is fair because that's how the Lord intended. Like, you know, you get together with that person and you do save yourself a lot of heartache. However, growing up now, we're trying to figure out like I didn't know I could survive such a brutal heartbreak until I finally dated like this one person. And then I was like, it wasn't even that serious, but it was my first one. So I was like experiencing this, and it was really confusing to me because I knew in my head, I'm like, what, you know, our dating experience wasn't that serious. It was very short. So why do I feel this way? Whereas if I would have experienced that a little bit younger, if I would have been allowed to like, oh, I have a crush on this guy, you know, and again, we talked about it in a previous episode, but I had this weird feeling inside because of all the purity, like we were kind of pushed, like having a crush on someone wasn't a good thing.
Right.
When you were, so then getting older, now I'm allowed, now this is cool. Oh, they call them crushes for a reason. So I'm experiencing what all these high school, middle school girls already have survived. They've already like been through that and they already know, okay, it's not a big deal. Like we can get over it. Here I am in my 20s experiencing that like first big heartbreak and I'm like devastated. So like, I don't know. There's two extremes there. You know what I mean?
I feel like, Katherine, you've got so much to say. I just want to jump in really quick because like you, Kareem, I was not given any parameters on dating. It was like, good luck. And what I saw was not purity. And so I wanted to be pure. I had the idea of like, I'm going to save myself for marriage. But, you know, it was like the popular boy and you wanted the popular boy to like you. So I was dating in elementary. Like I had boys that I had crushes on and like, you know, we were meeting at the playground and we were going on the swings together. But it escalated very quickly.
Oh, if I was my daughter, I'd have broke some little legs. Like, you don't get to swing, buddy. Like, you need to go to another swing set.
I know, right? Well, it's cool. You can't control that.
Scared for your child.
But this is where we live and learn. So even as a parent, sometimes now my daughters, like I literally just had this conversation with one of my daughters, my youngest. And she was like, Mommy, I don't see it the same way as you. Like you see everything through the eyes. This wasn't her exact wording, but like, I see everything as perverse. I see that motives are perverse. I see people are perverse. Because that's how
They are though. Like, what does the Bible tell us? Like,
Yes.
there is
Thank
none
you.
good, not a one. So
Yeah.
they're all perverse and left to their own devices.
Please keep it real. And so when they are like, Mommy, I think you're overreacting, I'm like, no, we got to put some boundaries. And so I even asked her,
boundaries.
like, what are the because now she's talking to someone and we call it talking to someone until they come and approach us as parents and ask for permission.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
One, because I want her to have a partner in life that is going to be brave enough to do the uncomfortable things for her, who's going to sacrifice his own comfort for her.
Because taking notes of what he's going to do.
That's the base of a good that's the base of a marital relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's you're not about yourself anymore. You're about
Right.
the other person. And so I agree. Like, are you ready to just not think of yourself? Are you ready to live for someone else? Like, and if that's not the case, then you're not ready for dating because dating leads to marriage.
That's good.
And so we have very different philosophies, but my daughters are constantly telling me like, we're not like you. We're not perverts like you.
You know, it's funny that they say that until they're in that situation.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they're like, well, maybe I was a
That
little
speaks
pervert.
to just
Well,
lack of experience, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
You know?
yeah, exactly. Katherine, what
were you gonna say? Yeah.
what were your
so
experiences?
I have a similar experience to yours kind of thing. I did not grow up Christian. I was saved as an adult as well. I kind of grew up Catholic, you know, that type of Catholic where you only went to church on Sundays. You only heard about God on Sundays. You knew about God, but you didn't really know him. So for me, I started dating as well, 13, 14 years old. My mom was really open. She said, you know what, bring your boyfriends to the house instead of you going to their houses. So to me, that kind of opened the door for me to be open with my mom and bring them in.
Yep.
Now, she never explained to me what dating was. What do you do? What do you don't do? You know, it was just kind of learning outside of the house. For me, for example, I started dating really young. And I remember I was dating just older men, older guys, 5-6 years older than me, all the way
wow.
up until...
Okay.
And that was my brother's best friend. He was my first boyfriend, and he
Yeah.
was 6 years older than me.
Wow.
But I did date him for a couple years, and I dated another person. And then by the age of 16, 17, I started dating my son's dad. I got pregnant when I was 18. You know, so for me, dating was kind of a whatever fits my needs. It was kind of my dating cycle. It wasn't really what I had in mind, what the future was. It was just right there in the moment. So whatever fit my needs, I will do whatever needs to get done. Now, I do remember my first boyfriend just kind of saying, show me that proof of love. You know, and that's how my virginity was, you know, taken. I don't really remember how everything started. I just remember how just going from one boyfriend to the other, just doing that. I did date all the way up until I was 27. That's when I had my first heartbreak, completely heartbroken. And that's when I completely surrender. You know, so I think dating, you really need to have a purpose for dating. And I didn't really have that. You know, you have to date with a purpose. And I always tell my single friends, you know, you have to keep in mind, what do you want? I don't think you should date without a purpose. If that person is not thinking of whatever you want to do, which is, it should be marriage. You should be dating to get married. So if that's not your goal, then right there and then you should be, you know, getting out of that relationship. And to me, it took me that long time to really know that that's what I wanted. Because, you know, marriage for me, I grew up in a household where it was divorce before I was even married, before I was even born. So to me, marriage was always out of the picture. I didn't want to be married. I, you know, nothing about marriage. Didn't know anything, didn't want to know anything, nothing like that until I got saved. And that's when I was, all that anger and sadness that I had from living in that situation, that's when I said, I do want to get married. It was always in the back of my mind, but I knew, I always said, you know what, my parents' marriage failed. Everybody around me, all of their marriages failed. Mine is going to fail as well. So I'm not going to go through that. So I always stopped myself. I got engaged with my son's dad, and I broke that off because I said, I'm not going to waste my time. I kind of dated to make sure that I was able to escape as soon as possible. So I didn't want anything, I didn't want anything that was holding me back. I wanted to make sure that if I didn't like you, we didn't want to be together, I can just bounce. You know, in a marriage, you can't really do that. So to me, that was just restraining myself getting married. So I never wanted to until I was older.
It's interesting to me that, like, you know, I think the three of us, we all, I was saved as an adult as well. And I don't think there was no education on dating like you mentioned before. And like the church has so many, prescriptions. I don't know what's a better way to say
tell
it.
You so
right?
Many
There's
things.
like, do it this way. I mean, and I think that there is a lot of order in like, what's the purpose in this? But it's interesting when you're like, my purpose is to fit my needs.
Right.
That's really what the world
that's why you date, I guess.
Ascribes to. Right. It's like, what do I need in this moment?
Right.
You know, in middle school and high school, it's popularity.
Right.
And really for me, like dating was affirmation of my self-worth. Like helped me to see value in myself. But marriage was always in the back of my mind. But I didn't realize that the process was so damaging.
Right.
In the church, though, like, I don't want it to be like misconstrued that only happens in the world.
Right.
Like,
No, it
if
happens.
you can walk into our church sanctuary right now, or in our, I love people watching. I like people watching. That's like one of my favorite things to do. So I sit in the atrium on Sundays, like with
On
a
our
baby because
church,
she's loud. And I love people watching. But unfortunately, one of the things I see when I'm people watching is that I could not tell you the difference between the kids at my middle school that I taught and the kids at the church. And there's something that it shines through, right? People reflect how they feel inside a lot of times through how they dress on the outside, right? So that hypersexualization at a young age, it's there in the church too, which tells me that we're not doing a good job, to your point earlier, Alex, answering the question, right? Having those conversations, because I guarantee you nobody sat down with you, youth leader or otherwise, and had real conversations. All you probably heard in youth rallies in church was my hot wife, don't date until you're married.
Don't date until you're married.
All this stuff. And it's just like,
God
and I
has the
date my wife.
perfect one for you.
God doesn't have the perfect one for you, quote unquote. The one is when you get to the altar. Like, that's how you know that was the one.
But
right?
that's what's preached. That's what was, I heard that preached a lot, and it was always around Valentine's Day. It was always like, I already, like, I don't know, if I didn't know what day it was, I'm like, I know Valentine's Day is coming up because they're starting to talk about the purity thing. That was always like a 4-week thing, at least in our youth groups, right? It's like a 4-week series on purity, and it ends with like whatever. And like, the intention is good because they're teaching this is what the Bible says about marriage and about purity. Like, I get that, but it's become so pressed, I think, to the point where, like, again, even in kids' church, boys and girls don't sit together. There's
which
red,
is so
there's
strange,
blue,
right?
You don't make purple, but from the beginning, we're already taught that, like, okay, there's a separation here until we're ready. Again, the philosophy, it's good, but then there's all these twists. Growing up, then you hear these different things. Well, kiss dating goodbye. I never read that book on purpose.
I'm gonna jump in there because I did not read a lot of these books. I've read something else that I ascribe to and I share with my kids. But share a little bit about some of the philosophies, because I don't know.
So I think you guys have heard more than me. But growing up in church, again, there was only 2 big ones. And there was one, and I think it's just the denomination I grew up in, AG. I heard a lot, God has your one for you, and it's going to happen at the right time. You just got to wait. You just got to pray, whatever. And I did see that happen for a lot of my friends. Like, I saw it was like, they're just doing their thing, and then this random guy comes out of nowhere into their lives, and they're married 6 months later. Like,
chilling.
it's just what happened. So I'm like, okay, but that wasn't everybody's story.
Right.
And then it wasn't until I went to college that I finally heard somebody say, that's BS. Like, no, you have to do, like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
It's probably me, and it was probably uncensored.
It wasn't. It was actually someone else that we both know, which, Kareem and I went to college together. But, and I heard multiple people, and I had never heard that before. I was like, even from my parents.
So you, in college, you heard, no, it's not true. There's just not one person. Like, elaborate a little bit.
So it was always no, I kiss dating goodbye, and it's courtship. And when you finally find that one, then you start courting them, and it's long-term thing and blah, blah, blah. So I was always like, okay, yeah, that's how it's going to happen. I just got to wait and pray and be good. And then I went to college, and I was introduced because, like, it was like all these kids from all these other denominations, other upbringings, and they were like, "What? Who says that? That's dumb. Like, no, you have to date, because how are you going to know what you like? You have to get to know different people, because there's not just one for you. Like, you have to put yourself out there. Like, of course, you pray about your spouse and you pray for the right one, but no, that's silly to believe that there's just one soulmate out there, which comes from, like, going back to the idea of, like, soulmates, that comes from, like, mythology. That's not even a Christian concept, which we'll get into that later. But then at that point, I was like, okay, there's 2 different roads here. Which one am I going to believe? And then I saw some of my friends, it did happen one way for them. Sure. But others of my friends, it happened another way. So I'm just like, okay, so which one's the right way? I don't know. But those were the 2 big ones that I kind of heard growing up.
So how did you interact with those theories? Because, I mean, you obviously have
He's very opinionated.
Yeah. No. I mean, like, you're very, like, adamant that was not the right.
Yeah, I don't.
For you.
For me, that wasn't the right thing. And I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find that being the right thing for anybody. What ends up happening, especially with women, like, I have like such a I used to joke in college, I want to start a women's ministry, right? So that's where I'm going to find my wife. but I've got like a very, like, soft spot for women, which is one of the reasons, like, I prayed that God would, like, give me a girl, and he did. And it's because, like, their hearts are so tender. And one of the things about having that tender heart, though, is that all of these different philosophies and things like that can kind of distort and kind of pull at those heartstrings and really warp them, so that they kind of grow up with a weird sense of self and a weird sense of relationship. And the whole, like, for example, if you follow the concept of the one, right? That was one of the concepts that I've heard in college, and just was ridiculous to me. What if I'm in the grocery store, right? And my one walks up to me and I happen to have the flu right then and there, right? And I sneeze in their face and snot gets all in their eye. I don't know about you, but those first impressions would like make everything for me.
It's pretty memorable to me.
I'm not so sure that I would want to talk to this person who sneezed in my face and probably gave me the flu again, right? So I just messed up my one.
Right.
If it's the one, how are you orchestrating where they come from, how you get there, how you meet together? I just don't believe in that. It's kind of like following the will of God. Like everybody says, oh, there is this will of God for your career. There's this will of God for your aspirations. There's this will of God for your relationships. Well, wait a second. Actually, no, that's not scriptural. I don't know where you find that. And I'll explain that,
Yeah.
right? So that's a loaded concept.
Yeah.
So what is the will of God? Okay, the will of God, as he defined in the Bible for our lives, is to live a sanctified life, to live a life that is honoring of him, and to live a life that is led with love, right? That is the will of God. Well, what about the rest? How do I know if this person is right for me? Well, God tells us that he will give us the desires of our heart, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if you are living a sanctified life, if you're living a life that is God honoring, if you're living a life that's led with love, then the desires of your heart will actually be God's desires. So outside of those three spheres of influence, living a life that is sanctified, a life that's God honoring, and a life that's filled with love, God doesn't really care what you do, because everything that you do will be led by him. So from the moment you meet a person and you evaluate, is this the person that God has for me? Your steps will be what? Led by him. When you go on that date and that person says this or does this, your response to that will be, well, led by God. So at the end of the day, I kind of said this earlier and alluded to it, the way that you know that this is the person that God has for you is, did you make it to the altar? There you go. It's as simple as that. If you're doing those three things in the sphere that God wants you to be doing, everything else is going to be led by him anyway, so it almost doesn't matter.
This is so interesting. I love that we all have had such different experiences and different perspectives on this. Even as a mom and as a mom who kind of lived both lives, and now I desire my children to really be in the will of God, really that their lives are glorifying to him and that their lives reflect Christ.
Absolutely.
Right? That's my heart for my children. And whether they decide to stay single, if that is their heart's desire, like if they don't have a desire to not be selfish, right? Like to not live for someone else. I say that like loosely. But I feel like I've kind of meshed the two together. So I have allowed my children I have encouraged my children to be very honest with me. And we've had a lot of very real y'all, when you ask for honesty, just it comes loaded. Yeah. You get it.
Be careful.
Yeah, and so we've had to talk about some very real issues at a young age. In middle school we were talking about pornography. Yeah. So
you better elementary now.
Yeah, now it's elementary, and I mean especially with the access that kids have now on their phones, even with firewalls and all that stuff. I mean, kids are just so smart now. Mm-hmm. They know the workarounds. And honestly, one of my daughters was exposed to pornography. Someone sent it to her. So it wasn't something she was looking for. It was and then also being part of a blended family, I knew that they were seeing other influences outside of my home that I had provided for them. Right. So I knew I got to come correct because my children are going to see everything. And I have no idea what they're seeing when they're with their dad.
Right.
And I have no idea my children went to a private Christian school. Predominantly, we did go to public school for a little while, but you're right. All the same issues in the Christian school. Mm-hmm. And so I taught my kids early, like just because they say they're Christian doesn't really mean that they really are living a life that is God honoring. So you have to kind of weed it out.
Right.
But I think it's so interesting when you say like, there's not a one, having such definitive feelings. Both of you kind of allude to that, which is, I mean, I'm hesitant to say yes. Like, right, I've been married and divorced a couple of times. And
well, what happens when, I'm sorry to interrupt. What happens when Greg dies? If he leaves you first, let's just say Greg dies next week And
Lord.
In the name of Jesus.
I know. I'm sorry.
I feel you
It's
though.
harsh, but
Conversation.
it's a harsh reality. But
Yeah.
what if Greg dies next week, right? Greg was the one for you, right? Are you not going to remarry because your one has died?
Now you get two.
Now you get two. So you had two the ones, which kind of brings you back to my initial point.
I mean, I'm going to say this. Like, I do feel like there's, wow, that is so loaded.
Yeah.
That is so loaded.
Heavy.
Not
to just be so direct and
I
say,
want to
like,
talk over
the one. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Alex.
But like to
I
your
gotta-
point about like, if you're following the will of God, meaning if you're living XYZ, if you're following and God will give you the desires of your heart. Yes, I believe that. However, I know women who are a little bit older than me, like the desire of their heart is for marriage and family. And I know them personally and I see their lives and I see the fruit of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the one thing I'm like, I know that is what you've desired and it's just not happening for them. Like, it's just not. And I think they'd also, the specific people I'm thinking of, they do kind of subscribe to the philosophy, like, okay, the one's gonna like come along and whatever. So I don't think they.
Well, that might be the problem. They ain't going out on dates because they think they're waiting on the one.
Right. Jump in. I'm getting excited now. Go ahead.
Right. No. In regards to that, I'm just going to jump into the ladies dating. I think at church, dating inside of the church, I think there's like one man for like 10 women. So
depends on your church.
It's really difficult. I mean, honestly, I was there. I lived it, and you do want to date. It's just that there's just
not enough in the dating pool.
Oh, we're gonna get
There's
into
not.
that.
I had to leave First Baptist to find my wife, so I get it. Like, yeah.
And it's just really hard. I mean, I do agree with you. There's not just one person. I think you do have to have your list, and you have to have the things that are negotiable and the things that are not. And I don't think there's a specific person that's going to meet absolutely everything that's on your
Yeah.
list.
Right.
But there are things that you're like, you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, okay, he doesn't have long hair. That's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it can be as simple as that, and it can be, super big as what kind of career he's on. So I do agree with you 100%. I don't think that there's just one person. I think there's like a handful of people that you can choose from.
I feel like, kind of to the earlier point, we are so broken and we don't even really know ourselves truly. And I think a part of dating is like what I like. But what I like is not necessarily what I need.
Right.
And I think that God knows my needs. He knows the plans that he has for my life. I do ascribe to that. I do believe that God has a plan for my life. Yeah, like there's a framework, right? But I think there are different phases and there's different priorities that you have. So like when I was in high school, right, it was for, I needed somebody to love me. I was looking for an escape. But then after I had children, I like my first marriage was love. A little bit of pride because I had invested in it, and I was like, no, I'm taking this to the altar.
You ain't going nowhere.
I worked for this one. So I kind of pushed it. But to be honest, my second marriage, I kind of given up on the idea of that, the one and this romantic love. And I was like, well, like he's my friend and we have a really fun time together and we can do life together. But it was not complete. It did not. There is a love that ministers to the soul. And if you are a lover of people and you are a lover, like that's in your soul, you need somebody to match that or you will feel incomplete. I have tried to walk through the motions and I was fooling myself. And so I think that there is someone, I think, and I'm not going to say the one, I'm not going to say one, but I think there are souls that are created to love other souls.
So you're talking about, what you're talking about though is compatibility.
Right.
Not necessarily like this is, because my wife is what I wanted and my wife is also what I needed.
Right.
So you're talking about compatibility. Me and my wife are compatible, like very compatible. And it's weird and people watching might be like, oh, that's weird. Something's wrong there. I don't think I have ever like argued with my wife. Like we have little, somebody will throw a little comment across the room. The other person will be like, I got you. I heard that. I'm coming for you next. But no, it's never been like a fight. Like, oh, because we understand each other and we know the other person's language.
I mean, that's personality.
But
so,
how long
right?
did it take you to get there? Because I think you have to be whole yourself.
That's
you know what I mean?
that's the key. Because you mentioned earlier, and I love what you said. People have this list, right? I call it the Prince list.
Oh, good.
I call it the Prince list because it can be real or it can be a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have that Prince list, now people have different types of lists. And I'm speaking directly to the Prince list. You had a very practical list, which I appreciated. But a lot of women are raised in the church with the Prince list. Like, oh, y'all pray for y'all's husband. Like, God, my husband needs to be 6'5".
I always hear that. I always hear them go for the looks.
No,
I tell my kids,
ma'am.
you better get over that real quick.
Like, stop. Like, that is not spirit led. That is
Right.
not
Yeah.
God
That is
led.
right.
Like, that is flesh led.
Right.
Now, if you can admit that that's flesh led, there's nothing wrong with being attracted to that 6'2" Sven character, right? That's cool. Like, go for it. If that's what you like blonde hair, blue eye, white boys, like, go for it. Like, that's your thing. Like, ride with it. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't take those things and assign them to God. Don't take those things and assign them to the one, because that's not God moving. God said it's not good that man should be alone, right? Okay, absolutely. But I believe that he gives you the freedom to choose who you are not alone with. And I think that's the thing that it kind of comes back to. And I think it comes back to choice. And Alex, you mentioned earlier, sorry to rewind a little bit,
you're
and
good.
we can come back to this, but you mentioned that when you were young, you were taught to date a certain way. Therefore, when you got older, you didn't have the same experiences that those middle school girls have.
Right.
I just want to say, like, on a transverse side looking at that, like, that's a blessing.
Right. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, some of those, like, girls, like, that heartache that they went through was a guy said he loved me. We slept together. I haven't heard from him since.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant now.
Right.
Like, God protected you from a lot of that stuff. And I don't think heartbreak is a necessary experience.
I agree.
Like, why do I need to be heartbroken? Like, that doesn't make sense.
It's
like,
not necessarily the need to be heartbroken, but it's also the navigating the world of,
The
like,
experience,
guys. And,
right?
like,
Yeah.
you know, when you get older, again, growing up where we're so separated, girls are so separated from guys. I did go to public school.
Yeah.
And I did go to, like, okay, there's a guy over there and I think I want to be friends with him, but I know in the back of my head, I've got all these things running through my head. Oh, boys only want one thing. Oh, okay. And then, so I wouldn't even approach a guy to be
they
friends
do.
with him.
At that age, they do. That's
But,
just,
like, even younger,
You
you
said
know,
that's right.
I'm
That's
like,
it, one
I
thing.
can't even be friends with a guy. I don't know how to interact with a guy. And how does this translate later to I'm interested in possibly talking to this person, but I don't even know how to approach it, you know?
friendship, right?
So for the sake of, like, talking about philosophies, I love that you say that. Like, I tell my kids, you need to be able to be friends. And, like, friendship is such a key part of any relationship, whether you're gonna, like, just date or you want marriage. Like, you need to be friends with each other. I want my girls to, like, I talk about it, so we talk about it, and they've liked different boys, and I've always been very careful as a parent to not, like, I mean, I've had a hard no that I'm like, he's a no. But I kind of have my list, and really my list is, are they God honoring? Are they respectful of me? Because the rest of the list is really up to my children. What do they prefer?
Yeah.
Right.
But something that I want to share before we wrap this up, guys, just about philosophies, is I probably did a little too early. Some of my kids were like middle school. We read the book, The Right One, How to Successfully Date and Marry the Right Person. It's a book by Frank Martin and Jimmy Evans. And Jimmy Evans is a pastor in Texas, and he also has a marriage ministry with his wife, and his children now are participating in that ministry. And what I loved about this book, because it wasn't like he has to have, like, these qualifications and she has to have this, but it's the conversations that you should have while you're dating. And so it's talking about, well, how do you spend your holidays? How do you want to spend your holidays? Do you spend time with your family? Do you like to travel during the holidays? Like, the things that encourage compatibility. How do you handle your finances? You know, talking about money.
Like what Katherine was saying. Yeah.
Right. But it's
Important
getting
things.
those things out, because when you're dating as a young person, or even when you're dating, you don't really know yourself.
Right.
You don't think to ask about, like, what kind of vacations do you like to take? Like, how do you want a vacation? Like, I just think do you take care of your in-laws? Like, are you going to take care of your mom when they're your parents when they're elderly?
Yeah.
Is that something that's important to you?
That's
like,
good.
those are conversations that really not only establish compatibility and friendship, but I think they also are very realistic.
And they encourage communication.
Right.
That's huge, right?
Yes.
Well,
So
it's like
I love that.
What Katherine said, just dating with intention.
Exactly.
Which I think is,
Right.
a good.
But
Meandering
you
through.
you mentioned earlier about like not being able to date young or dating, and we talked about dating young earlier in the segment, but why can't we encourage, especially in the church, our boys and girls to be friends?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, why do you have to go on a date?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Like,
that's true.
Go out with a group of you guys, and you'll get to know that person when you're in the group.
Yes.
Right.
And most importantly, you'll see how they function around other people, because that's usually going to be the real them.
Now I was kind of that was
good.
spoken
I love
over
that.
me,
Yeah.
and I know wrapping up, but like that was not over me, but that was spoken like I think when I got that age in high school, that was kind of mentioned, like, oh yeah, you can like group dates are good. Go
And you're
out,
like, what? I can group date?
Yeah. And then I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh god, yeah, because maybe it's just me. I'm just socially awkward, but yeah.
No, but I think this brings up a good point. There's a lot of philosophies out there, but I think the best thing I think what we can kind of all agree to, even if we may have different end stories, I think we can all can agree that if you want to date, obviously, what's your intention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you want to get from that? So we hope this conversation about philosophies of dating has been helpful, maybe eye-opening, kind of calling out the unspeakable things, maybe the things that you've been thinking about but haven't heard.
Write in the comments, what is your philosophy of dating?
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, and also, in all seriousness, we do want to know. We want to talk about it. We want to address it because we need safe places
Yeah.
to be able to ask these questions and not just in a club. Well,
And talk about it in a very real way.
yeah, we're not all blessed with Mr. Bell conversations.
Just being able to have conversation about it, I think, like you're saying, is the most important thing.
Right.
So many church leaders don't talk about these things. They're afraid to talk about them because of somebody's opinion about their commentary and giving their opinion. So that's a big thing. But parents and friends and churches just being willing to have conversation, and conversation means listening to,
Amen.
right? So
That's
I
good.
think that's the biggest key in any of these scenarios, is just having conversation.
That's awesome.
good.
This has been a great conversation so far. Please make sure you check out the other conversations in this series because it starts with one and it starts with you.
Are we supposed to do that? One.
I don't know.
Perfect.
Good job, guys.